On today's episode of KnapChat, we're joined by Damien Hodgson from Old School Architects, who talks to us about his involvement in launching Germany's version of changing rooms, sustainability in building design, and the challenges of a problem-solving brain. I hope you enjoy, and thanks again for joining us. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of KnapChat, the podcast for people who put the planet first. I am joined on the green sofa by Damien from Old School Architects. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
We'll go straight into Old School Architects. Why is that? What is that? What do you do? Who are you?
Okay, Old School came from the fact that we bought an old school in Alford, locally. Very quickly, we were starting a new architectural studio. My wife and I ran the studio, and we were going to be Hodgson Architects because that's what you do. And we went and spoke to a couple of people, and they just went, "Oh, that's just terrible." And it was just like this is the first meeting. All we had was the name, and we were trying to build something on that. And they said, "Well, you can't be Hodgson Architects for a number of reasons." And they said, I said, "What else have you got?" And we literally had an old school. The strategy was to build the studio and a home for the young family and build the identity around it. But it hadn't occurred to us that that might be a better name.
Because it has double connotations, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And then we get the people, depending on the generations, will ask on the email address whether it's spelt with a K. Okay. So we still get that question. But that helps
some
us.
kind of rap artist.
Yeah. It's just like, we've got record collections, but... So, it was very much wrapped up in that. The reality of, I say of course, but is that being our project, it's fallen way down the bottom of the list. So from day one, it was going to be the project. And thankfully, we've incrementally been so busy that it's never yet happened. Okay. So it's still as we purchased it.
And do you work from there, or is it?
No, we had a temporary office. I think, like many people, we worked in the shed. Kitchen and the shed, and then a small office based in Louth locally, and then we've moved to a larger office within the same block. So the temporary nature has become a little more permanent, but still very much the old school.
So, as I may have said to you in the past, I am the son of an architect, and I have 43 years of experience of how architects think and behave, and don't necessarily finish their own projects because they're so focused on finishing other people's.
Indeed.
So I do understand that.
And I know a lot of builders, and thankfully, within the trade, it's always the same. Mm-hmm. Your own home is sort of at the end of the list.
And it's difficult, though, isn't it? I should imagine, with your brain being so creative and problem solving, and seeing things in a very different way, that you maybe things are never finished anyway.
Well, I think. Part of the problem, the issue or the creative opportunity, was that we had a young family, and our ideas and what we needed changed so rapidly when they were young. So initially, we were very much about one thing and safety and the idea of a toddler, and then 6 months down the line, they'd come back and look at the nearly finished school plans and realise that wouldn't suit a 1-year-old. Yeah. And then. Now they're much older, and now it's all about Wi-Fi and closed rooms. And so, it's been an ongoing brief.
So you're waiting to kick them out of the house,
so
and then you can finish.
As has happened a couple of times with clients, by the time the kids are at university, it'll be ready for them. Yes. Yes.
Yes, I feel that struggle as well with our house. And so, how long has Old School Architects been running for?
In name and in practice, just over 5 years.
Okay. And before then, what were you doing?
Before then, my wife and I both worked for commercial practices and larger practices, both in London and then over in Sydney. My wife's from Sydney.
Wow.
And we went across and worked there. So we've got a wide spectrum of experience, both project type but also internationally. Mm-hmm. But I think, as with many people and locally, and they also become our clients, there's a lot of people that leave or have left Lincolnshire and their family gone away and then have come back. Mm-hmm. So
And is that what you did? Are you from
effectively
Lincolnshire?
no. I grew up in Norfolk.
Okay.
My parents pretty much retired here, so we had very little connection until I started rebuilding my parents' house when they bought and retired locally. But yeah, it was a new perspective for us to be in Lincolnshire. But yeah, with the school age and the children, the priorities shift. But yeah, we're very firmly rooted now in Louth and Lincolnshire.
And so that's something that we often talk about as an agency, and I do as a person, that the importance of bringing skills and knowledge and expertise from outside any area, but particularly Lincolnshire, because that's where we're based, and sort of trying to then spread that out. Because as I understand it, you not only have you worked in Sydney and down in London, but you spent some time in Germany as well in the early part of your career. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, happily. The architectural setup, as your father has probably made you aware, you do the degree and then a postgraduate, and in between the two, you go out and spend a year in practice or something similar. And I won a bit of a scholarship competition to study firstly in Austria with Daniel Liebeskind, and that allowed me to work in Germany with them afterwards.
Cool.
So I was very connected and involved there, but it's just I think without drifting too much from the point, the reality and what I see locally is that there are so many people that have moved away and worked in big cities with big clients and big name corporations and big projects in any field, and then return, and actually the pool of people that I meet on a daily basis locally, that when you push, they're like the leading expert in something, or they do this, or they fly regularly across the world because they are the person. And it's far beyond what you might expect, but imagine we've got some real experts that have just returned back to Lincolnshire.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
I just, the school run and idle conversations, and you suddenly realise that the chap next to you, is genuinely a world expert, or isn't really around much because he's flying around the world. I'm very careful not to name names of tasks, but it's just, I think it's one of the things that we like to push, and particularly with the networking and things like this, that there are so many like-minded people who have gone through the same things. So my experience in Germany and then in Sydney, I can pull back into my work now, but also sparks conversations every day.
Were you in a TV show or something in Germany as well? Or is that
I was, yes. Well, rewind. We're working in commercial practice, so a well-known architects. But as we were young and had ideas that we could set up our own practice, and a couple of my friends had set up, and trying to pull, in those early days, trying to pull work in or make a name for yourself. And we would obviously sit there, and I, with my reference of the UK, said there's a massive market because of makeover shows.
okay?
And
But they hadn't hit Germany.
And it hadn't hit Germany,
Okay.
which was quite a useful thing in a lot of respects, that sometimes if you knew what was happening in London, be it in music or film or concerts, they would be in Hamburg a couple of months later. So I did very well there. But I kept saying there appears to be this boom because of makeover shows, and people are thinking that they can do it, but an awareness of design. And then that just led to a couple of conversations and a TV production company in Hamburg who were just thinking, we should do something like this. So we did a couple of test shots with them, and then we led the design and production of the first makeover show.
That's pretty cool.
It was madness. I mean, there's a joy to, it all had to happen in 3 days. So we'd go into someone's apartment, do one room, and you'd go in on the first day, strip, prepare, paint. Second day was largely painting and some building. Third day was finish and film it.
Wow.
But it all had to happen in 2 weeks. So the absolute luxury was that there was a lot of money and experts. So if we had an idea for a child's crazy bed or a living room that floated and spun round, and it sounded like good television, it would get done. So and really quickly, they would throw people at something to make it happen. And that got quite addictive because obviously once you up, each time you up the level and then that show goes down really well, they're like, can we do something wacky again?
So you start trying to best.
So then you were just loading it and loading it. But it was a really interesting but sort of pretty sustained, full-on thing. But from the first couple of shows, it was obvious that it was going to be a big winner.
Yeah.
And then it just went on for a good number of series.
And were you still involved after that, or do you?
I did the first couple of series, and then I chose to move. I came back to the UK because we'd kind of got so involved in it that we were sort of a mini TV production company, part of the office, rather than the architecture practice that we.
Okay.
That it was running at the same time.
So you lose your focus a little bit,
and kind of, but it became a really big thing rather than an extra. But
great experience though.
Really. I mean, looking back, it's fun.
Yeah.
Really full up. But we would do 3 shows a week, so there was one filming week. Just to be really clear, so we'd start one show on the Monday, and do that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We'd start the second room on the Tuesday, so have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Third one on the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So on Wednesday, we had to start one room, finish another, and we're in the middle of another. So Wednesdays were quite busy.
Wow, gee, that is
and
a
then
lot.
the second week was production and design wrap up for the week after. There was always a cycle.
That's incredible.
But coming back to sort of people and place and what we do, I hadn't really factored in the stories behind. So people had to nominate themselves or others to have a room makeover, and sometimes it was just, we're students, we haven't got money, but we need workspace.
Yeah.
And other times it was really, really powerful sob stories. And then you would spend £15,000 on one room when the whole house needed, a deep clean.
So it had an amazing.
And so there was an emotional tie-in as well as there was quite a lot to it. But,
yeah. And was that money put up by the TV company?
Yeah.
So what? Here's an idea. Get Heb and Griff and pretend that you're doing a TV show, and then you can do the old school building in maybe 3 days, maybe a week at a push.
Okay, and then, a week at a push. Yes. Okay.
Get some funding. Away you go. Amazing.
Fantastic. Get some funding.
We'll just do one room at a time.
Yeah, or we make lots of little rooms. No, but as you say, that's what architects are always doing in our heads. We're strategizing and working these things out. But yes, work in progress.
So that sort of leads me on to something interesting that I was thinking about. So I am a failed architect. I did architecture and planning at university, realised I was very terrible at the architecture side of things, went down the planning route, graduated, and then went into marketing, which is obviously not the standard route, but there we are. But that's partly why I take such an interest in it. And something that I think about quite a lot is things about like makeover shows and the sort of accessibility of designing things. It's a bit like marketing. It tries to turn everybody into a designer or an architect or anything in that. In that, is that something that it's something that we come across as a marketing agency, or we used to more in the early days. Now not so much. But do you come across people who sort of say, "Well, look, I've designed this. Can you just finish it a bit, and then and then we'll get someone to build it?" Or does that not happen so much?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, absolutely. The really bad sketches on the back of an envelope have now become, with AI, dare I bring that up, and things. Suddenly we're getting very detailed, but not quite complete sketches or layouts and things. And sometimes it's, I've done this, I just need you to finish it. And then you mention that they appear to have 3 floors and no staircases or things very nicely. But yeah, I think, so as part of the education, a lot of architects and architecture students go on and do a million other things. And as much as I, in part, chose architecture because I had this, I thought, clear vision. And then I find myself, having gone through the whole architecture process, doing a TV show and thinking I hadn't been, and the skills completely transferable.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the benefits of the architecture education. So I don't think you necessarily failed. It's just that you've taken the path of not becoming an architect.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was crap at it, so and impatient as well. I
Right.
didn't have the sort of the detail and I'm just going to I'll do this, and then we get a crit and people are like, what have you done there? Like, don't really know, but we got to the end point. But yeah, so
I think I was able to, and I think this is the skill set. I was always able to talk about my project,
Yes.
whether or not I'd actually displayed it behind me in time. Very reliant on models, which I still use, sort of cardboard models.
Have you got a stash of like endless models in your attic or something?
No, they're all in the office. We've got workplace for 12, and actually clear space for 4, because and every now and then we have a cull of the piles of models.
Not the people who work for you.
Not the people. It's purely the cardboard.
Right,
okay. Yeah, it's all about conveying things or getting things across to people, and we just find that if someone can pick it up and pick up a card model, and I found that all the way through my career, there is something about people poring over plans like they're maps, and then suddenly you bring out a little model, and people just go, oh yes. And they'd pretended the whole time that they fully understood it, but you can actually sort of demonstrate quickly.
See the
with
penny
that.
drop.
So and then people go, oh, it's so old school. And you go, yes, totally.
Tick.
It's just we've just always done that rather than CGIs and all of the
And
the other
this
methods.
isn't something I necessarily thought about before, but you mentioned AI, and is that being used well in architecture, would you say, or is room for improvement?
Well, I think there's as with generally the conversation about AI is that it should help or facilitate. It shouldn't be the one creating. So I've seen some really interesting things done with it, and I've seen shortcuts for it, and there are ways of getting images that look very convincing that might otherwise have taken days or hours to build. But if someone hasn't got the floor plans or worked out the intricacies, we have become very reliant across many fields as to that one final image. I lecture at university, so I mix lecturing and working in practice. I always have done. I've tried to keep that. And I think that's where the danger lies, is that people are so fixated with one finished image that might appear on a website or on a billboard or something. And they want that long before they've worked out I really enjoy a really nice, simple floor plan. And it comes back to your patience. People don't see the craft of that as much as I want the image.
Yes.
So I think the danger is when shortcuts are taken.
Yes.
In any generation. I think if you use it and use it well, and it has been demonstrated to me, and we've both been involved in presentations and talks where someone shows you that actually we might not be using our time in the most effective way. But I just wouldn't want it to be the creator of things.
I have this sort of image of AI creating. People just go, well, I'll do this sort of building design, and it creates some kind of Escher thing, like where it's sort of like
where
that
it doesn't
optical.
quite. And sometimes that's true.
Yeah.
And coming back to the client's plans, is that it's 95% there, but you can't join the circle.
Yes.
And then you have to unpick it all.
Yeah.
And that's part of the skill.
But I think that's it. It's a sort of an 80-20 thing, isn't it? You've got to ask the right questions and check it at the end.
Yes.
And you talked about sort of lecturing and presenting then, and you were at the So Festival fairly recently. What was that about?
That was Seascape along with Magnavita. And it was an investigation really from what I was involved in with coastal towns. And there was an exercise a number of years ago where they looked at places sort of Europe-wide, and they made relationships between, say, a coastal town in Poland or Denmark with Grimsby. So it wasn't. It was really about place.
That's quite cool.
And it was it was a revisit, basically, that the people that were involved in that came back together and discussed what happened since. And it was fascinating because it was about neighbourhoods, so people and place, and genius loci. Architects love these terms, but it's about the spirit of a place,
Yeah.
and the way in which that had been investigated by these individuals, but just the comparisons that it wasn't. It was two towns or two neighbourhoods, so a person in each would actually have a lot in common, without going into what country and passport and their life experiences. Two very different countries, but two individuals might be in very similar wavelengths.
Interesting.
And that sort of transfer of ideas.
Yeah.
But what was genuinely powerful and interesting was that the people that had done it, say, 15, 16 years ago, were now, as artists or creators or instigators of something, were now leading theatres, and arts councils and things.
So it really has made a difference.
So they'd gone through, but then we're now in a real position to activate and do things. So there was it was a small but powerful group of people, and everyone was really very much involved in it. It was fascinating.
So I suppose that comes down into something we were talking about on another episode. A chap called John Owen is talking about you give people the opportunity to exercise their imagination and their creativity. You don't tell them what to do. You just sort of give them that sort of inspiration, I suppose, and they go on and make it happen. And people in different places will have different ideas, and you can't necessarily say that one thing will work in two different places. But certainly you give people the inspiration, and they can take it on and adapt it for where they are. Yeah. And so that's really interesting. You enjoy doing that?
It was genuinely interesting because it was we're very, I think, as architects, place and locality and the local people is what we investigate and look at. And so to see how somebody with a waterside museum in another European country was leading that, and the social aspects behind it and the spatial, and how we can transfer the skills was genuinely sort of really interesting. And then just bringing in our experience of working locally and the coastal towns and what we see on a daily basis, but just connecting it with these others was really interesting.
That's really cool. It's great that sort of thing is happening here in Lincolnshire, and leading the way a little bit. Yeah. And I'm thinking that we talk about sustainability loss on this podcast, and it's something that that is increasingly important in building design, building creation, the restoration of heritage buildings and the creation of new ones. Has there been a change in that over the last sort of 20 years, and how's it manifesting itself?
I think quite simply the fact that we've now got 40-degree summers, and people are actually realising that things are changing. Yeah. Legislation has changed in terms of buildings and what we do and the fabric of buildings, and the way in which we can address new builds or renovations. A lot of our work tends to be, for good reason, it's very much what we're interested in, but adaptive reuse. So taking an existing building or structure and making more of it. Now that might be a barn or a stable or just an old house, but using that and then creating new space for a family. We only work for end users, so we don't do development work, because we like to actually understand the person and their brief and their things, what they would like to achieve. But the reality is that it's very current. So people are aware of the opportunity now of renewable energy sources, and they're hearing about it. So a bit like the makeover shows, air source heat pumps. If I said that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it would not have sparked a conversation. But now everybody has an opinion, even if they don't have one.
Yes.
And that's sort of, as I say, legislation helps no end. I mean, it's making our life slightly difficult because pushing and pulling, we're having to just affect what we're building and how. And there's been a lot of tradition up to now as to how we build things, and now that has to change to allow for insulation.
Yeah.
And that's for heat and for cold.
Yeah.
But just as that was all coming in, the legislation, we also had really hot summer months going on. So suddenly we were saying, look, we have to make changes, or it has to be this because of the legislation.
Yeah.
But they're also saying it's going to be 40 degrees tomorrow. How can we work on that? And they are linked.
So we live in a listed house, or our house is listed, and we put a load of insulation in the loft, and that's helped immeasurably in the winter months. But we've noticed in the summer, they're like, oh god, I thought old houses are supposed to be nice and cool,
Breezy.
but it's warm now, and warmer than we expect it to be, and we can't. We've got 2 mil glass in the windows, south facing, streaming in. But it's listed, so there's not a lot that we can do about it. And you sort of think, well, actually, something perhaps has to change going forwards. And there's going to be a point where conservation is so important. And I can't remember the phrase you used about the repurposing of buildings, but I think
adaptive reuse.
Yeah,
something
brilliant.
like that. Yeah,
really good. And you look at the work that you're potentially doing with Lou and Claire on the old granary of extending something that's already there with something that's new, and how those two marry together, whether you go with something entirely left field or whether it has to be within the conservation and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of consideration, and we need to preserve old buildings, but we also need to not be
to find the balance.
Sweating heavily in the summer.
Yeah. I think, as I say, the work we tend to get involved in, and that's because we show work that we've done in the past, and it is genuinely our interest. But you're exactly right. But then listed buildings, a lot of buildings are left because it just doesn't stack up because of the restrictions in terms of access through a building. There are a lot of buildings, so in most town centres, they will be used at ground floor, but maybe at first floor, but not above.
Yeah.
And we're working with a couple of projects to try and bring all, say, 4 floors into use. Mm-hmm. And for good reason, but there's a lot of restrictions as to, access and exit. And at some point, people just say, there's no value in me doing this. Yeah,
true. I mean, that was like our building in Brigg, in the office that we had before this one. It was lovely conservation area, 1800s. But actually, the accessibility was poor. It was on the first floor, and there's no way that we're going to get any form of accessibility up there. And we couldn't really do anything with it to make it warmer in the winter and colder in the summer. So huge challenges, aren't they? Expensive challenges.
Yeah.
And legislative challenges as well.
And one thing leads to the next.
Yeah.
That's a really awkward conversation as an architect, because it looks like I'm causing trouble. They're like, we'd like to do this, and I go, yes, but.
You can always blame it on the planners or the local authority or something.
Well, we tried that, but they come to us first, and then I have to say, well, okay, we'd love to.
Yeah.
But can we discuss X and Y? But
somebody said many years ago at an event I was at, they said that the next generation will always have the answers to the problems in one way or another. So would you agree with that? I mean, you're still in this. I'm not saying that our generation doesn't, but combined with the people who are coming through, perhaps we will in future find solutions to this that mean that we're not all sweating in old buildings.
I just think that sort of the heritage and the building stock that we've got, we do have to be clever about it, or think, because otherwise, the move away from town centres and into, let's say, newer buildings, or that general move away, there will be a lot of empty buildings.
I mean, there are already, aren't there?
There are, yes.
And we're worried about building new ones, but actually, you could walk through Brigg, and there are loads that you could think, well, actually, people could live in there. Let's not worry about making the high street like it was in the 80s. Let's make it like it is in the 2020s.
And there's a lot of drivers, and the larger cities are doing the same thing, like department stores, and lots of conversation about repurposing and what you can do with that classic department store size and scale, and how you break it up into other portions. But it's the town centres and the smaller villages, particularly locally.
It needs some good brains on it, doesn't it? People just to spin it around and say, well, how can we figure this out? And just one final thing that I wanted to ask you about, and I was listening to a podcast or something, and they're saying that architectural firms are proactively, in a way of kind of finding brains that think differently, proactively seeking people with dyslexia. And
Right.
because they see challenges in a different way, they don't necessarily go down the kind of the route most travelled. Is that something that you've come across or heard of?
Not directly that we've been that attuned, but coming back to what I was saying about lecturing, my direct impression of that, and the reason in part that I lecture, was because you can always learn something, and I completely get that they might be doing that. But I think within the architecture education, there's a mindset and a type of person that thinks differently anyway. But my learning on one particular day was a student had to do a calm space within part of their project. And everyone did round white rooms, and they might be padded or they might be Zen-like, beautiful timber floors. And then the final student presented, and it was just massive amounts of colour. She had stained glass windows. She had just so much going on. And it was just like, did you get the same brief? And she just stood there and she said, well, you have to realise that in my head, if I was in that white room with no distractions, I would lose it.
Yeah.
But with all the colour and the noise to divert my attention, that's when I can be at my most calm.
Wow. That's
And
really cool.
It was such a moment because it was her life. Well, her life.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
how her mind was working all the time. But you couldn't do. I mean, very often, very rare. I've never seen it before. People clapping in the presentation, just because we all learnt something.
Yeah.
And that would be my answer to that, is that yes, whether or not it's quite so direct, but just having somebody to say, no, hang on a minute, my experience is different.
Yeah.
Is really valuable for anybody. So, yeah, and that stuck with me because every time you think, well, it's clearly this is what it would be.
Yeah.
That day resonates because you go, well, is that for everybody?
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was great. It was really.
I think that's a brilliant place to wrap this up. Thank you so
Great.
much.
Pleasure.
I probably could have talked to you for a long time, but you would have left.
Yeah.
Before that point
Yeah.
ended. Thank you
Pleasure.
so much for coming and sharing your views and your insight, and really enjoyed it.